As we expected, Keir Starmer going in on ambulance delays specifically. There's another reason he's doing that today, because at 1 o'clock we expect to find out whether there will be more nationwide strikes from ambulance workers in February and potentially into March. And I was with the GMB union early in the week as they were discussing this with members. These were closed meetings, but certainly the mood music coming out of those meetings was there was no resolution on pay and there could be further strikes. So this is likely to hit the bulletins today. And Keir Starmer in the chamber really pressing the Prime Minister on ambulance delays. And what he did was he started off with a hypothetical question about if you had chest pains, how long might you want to wait for an ambulance? And he then turned that hypothetical question into a real-life story about a young woman called Stephanie, who was a cancer sufferer, lived in Plymouth. The hospital was just 2.3 miles away from her home. Her mother called an ambulance. It didn't arrive. Stephanie lost her life and she was just 26 years old. So he used her example in the comments. I have to say the chamber went silent at that moment. And then after or during Prime Minister's questions, Labour then put out a press release, as you were talking about, saying 37,000 patients with conditions like heart attacks and strokes have waited more than 3.5 hours for an ambulance in December. So Labour really pressing in on this. As for the Prime Minister, he did as we suspected he would. He said, I am trying to make sure there are minimum service levels when there are strikes, and you, Labour, are not backing me, and you're not doing that because, as he would argue, the Prime Minister, you're in the pocket of the union. So he brought back in to point this idea about minimum service levels, and Keir Starmer retorted by saying, there aren't minimum service levels on normal days for the NHS. So another uncomfortable Prime Minister's questions there for Rishi Sunak as these battles go on over strikes. And as I said before, Prime Minister's questions, from a government point of view, they are content in the contingency plans that the Cabinet Office put in place for military staff to man ambulances to try and keep service levels. They are pleased in a way with their contingency plans that they did work. And their hope is, I guess, that they can keep those contingency plans going. But the problem they have is the public do not blame, polling suggests, public sector workers for the strikes. They blame the government for not resolving them, and there is sympathy for public sector workers that work really hard and are suffering because of these crazy levels of inflation that is really eating into people's wages and cost of living. So another round of strikes due, still negotiations ongoing, but I would argue that the pressure on the government to try and resolve this is ratcheting up as the strikes look to go not to January but into February and March. And it's going to be another set of bad headlines for the government today when, as I suspect, at 1 o'clock ambulance workers announce more strikes.